Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today I'm using this new set I just got by Altenew called Golden Feather. It's just got some really detailed feathers in here with some decorations for them. I'm going to put it in my Misty and I'm going to ink this up multiple times with different Distress Oxide ink. So you can see I'm only inking up part of the stamp. I'm trying to stay close to the center. I want the center to be purple. This is Wilted Violet. And then I'm going to grab a tissue and I'm just going to dab on the edges of where my ink pad was on the stamp. And that way I don't get any of those harsh edges. So you could do a sponge dauber if you want. I just happen to grab a tissue on my craft mat. So I smudged my paper, good thing, before I stamped. So I'm just going to replace it with a new piece. This is Nina Solar White cardstock, cut to A2 size. And I'm just going to stamp it down here and you'll see that I'm not going to get the entire image because I only inked up part of it. And then what I'm going to do is use my next color. This is Peacock Feathers, and I'm going to focus more on the edges with the peacock feathers, but not the whole edge. So I'm sort of centering this toward the middle of the feather. And because these oxide inks are opaque and they have pigment qualities, they will stamp on top of one another. So some of my purple will get covered by this peacock feather. So I again use my tissue to sort of dab the edges so I don't get any harsh edges when I stamp it down. So you'll see here when I pick it up that now I've got two pretty colors on my stamp. For my third color, I'm using Faded Jeans, and I'm going to keep this mostly on the edges. I'm not putting too much of this color at first, and you can always go back and add more color and it'll just lay on top of the previous color. So I'm going to hit that base of the feather as well with this color, and again grab my tissue and just sort of dab it here and there. And I'm dabbing a little bit in the center of this since I already have a bunch of color down. I don't want too much blue on top of everything that I've already got. So now I'm going to press this down here. And you can see now that I've got most of it completely covered. I wanted to add a little bit more purple, so I'm going to go back in with the Wilted Violet at the top, being careful to make sure I dab the edges here. And so you can see it was a little faded because I dabbed some of the center when I first stamped that Wilted Violet. But again, these layer on top of one another, so it's really easy to get all different colors when you're stamping a larger stamp. And then I also noticed that there was a little bit of an area that didn't get very good coverage, so I'm just going to add a little bit of Faded Jeans to that one area. Again, dab it all around here just quickly, and then I'll stamp it down, and that will be complete. I did another version of this card with picked raspberry instead of the Faded Jeans, and I'll show you that at the end of the video. All right, so I'm going to sprinkle this with some clear embossing powder since it's pigment ink, just so I get a little bit of gloss over it. And there is some decorations you can use on top of these feathers. These are dots, and I'm going to ink this up with some Versamark ink. And then I'm going to sprinkle it with some gold embossing powder. This is Ranger Superfine. It's a really beautiful gold color. Now I'm going to trim this to 4 by 5 1/4. Now I wanted to add some gold to the edges of this card, so I'm going to use kind of our old technique here of distressing a card where we put the ink pad up to the edge. I'm just going to kind of brush it along all 4 of these edges. I'm being really careful not to touch it once I get the ink on it. And then I'm going to kind of run it through that same gold embossing powder, this container that I have. You could also sprinkle it on. I'm going to do that in the second round. But you can see that once I get the powder on there, you can see where my ink pad edges are. But this is really easy to fix. All I have to do is take a brush and I just kind of wipe away the powder I don't want. And the nice thing about using this sort of inked edges technique is that you can get sort of a rough edge. I didn't want a nice, clean, straight gold line. I wanted it to be really rough, like high in some areas, low in some areas. So I just brushed that away and then I'll heat it to set it. And I noticed that the bottom was a little thin. I wanted a little more there. So I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive with my ink pad the second time around. And remember, you can always brush away any excess that you don't want. And then I'll sprinkle that with some more of the powder and use my brush to kind of take away the excess that I don't want, especially where I got kind of those rectangular marks from my ink pad. Now I have this brush in my drawer that I use solely for this purpose, where I'm just using it to brush away embossing powder. So I'll heat that up, and I like the way that turned out. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to my sentiment. I got it from the Thoughtful Messages set by Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to stamp it with some VersaFine Black Onyx ink. Now my sentiment is black, but it's the only black on my card. So I wanted to complement it a little bit with some more black. So I'm going to take a Stampin' Up! Marker. I'm just going to fill in the center of the feather, and that will complement my sentiment. And then I'm going to take a 0.05 Copic liner and add a couple of more details along the side of the feather. So I'm just going to pick some random areas. I just kind of went around some of the curves on the right side, and then I also went on a few of the curves on the left. You want to be careful because it will be resisted by the embossing powder. Now I put some Scotch foam tape on the back and adhered it to a card base. And I was brushing away some of the powder, and then I realized, even though I remembered to do it, I forgot to actually do it. And that is to remove some of the marker that was being resisted by the embossing powder. So when I swiped it to get that extra powder off, I smudged the pen a little bit. But it's not a big deal, I just wiped up any excess that I hadn't smudged yet. And then I used a light hand with a sanding block to remove some of the smudges. It was really not a big problem. Okay, so that is the card for today. It's nice, clean, and simple. Now the other version I did with the picked raspberry, I'm going to show you here. I added a background to it. I used Fog ink by Simon Says Stamp. I used this script background stamp by Impression Obsession. And in the end, I decided that I liked it better just plain white. So anyway, so that's what I went with. And here is the final card. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.